Today, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest pain points for aspiring technical freelancers, which is getting your first client. And so joining me today is a panel of ML and data engineering freelancers. So we've got Cal, Agostino, and Saurabh. And these three guys, they're coming from three different backgrounds and three levels of experience. So I guess before getting into the discussion, let's just get a quick intro from each of the panelists so you guys can kind of have that in the back of your minds as you hear their answers and their stories. So let's start with you, Cal.
Thanks, Shaw. Glad to be here. So I've been a freelancer since 2021. I was a data engineer at the time, and I constantly had this problem at the companies that I was working at where it was hard to move data from one system to another. There wasn't really a great open source tool that was just a clean, small tool that did exactly what I wanted without a bunch of other extra stuff tacked onto it that made it heavy and kind of hard to use. So I decided to strike out on my own and create that tool, which I called SQL Pipe. It's the shirt that I'm wearing. And it's just a free open source tool that moves data from A to B. And that tool has been a marketing platform for me to offer my services to companies who find that tool and say, hey, clearly you're a guy who knows a lot about building data pipelines. Can you either help us implement your product, or can you help us do some other more bespoke thing? So that's how I got into it, and that's how I am currently paying my bills as a freelancer.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're doing data engineering freelancing services, and then you built this tool, which is like this standalone product, but it's basically like a lead magnet for your freelancing services.
Exactly. Actually, the tool came first. I created the
Oh,
tool,
interesting.
and probably like several months later, after I had done some SEO and some basic social media marketing, I started getting inbound leads.
Ah, interesting. All right, it looks like we lost Agostino because he was next. So let's jump to you, Sarap, and hopefully we get Agostino back.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me as well. So I've been doing data science and machine learning for around 5 years so far. And for the last year, I decided like I want to see what is out there. What does it mean to do something on your own? How easy is it to get clients? But of course, I wasn't ready to do a full jump. So I decided to, after working hours or on weekends, to try to find clients, do some small MVP, small work, and see what actually works out there. But yeah, I will tell the full story, I guess, in a later stage.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for joining us. And we got Agostino
Thank you.
back. So quick intro, or maybe his camera's frozen. Are you with us, Agostino? Well, hopefully his connection will. It looks like he's in like a coffee shop or something, or a co-working space. So hopefully he gets back soon. Well, just to kind of like give the context, Cal's been doing freelance work full time for the past 5 years. Saurabh's been doing the side hustling for the past year. Agostino's been doing full-time freelance work for the past 8 months or so. So let's just jump right into the conversation. The first question, I think at the top of a lot of people's minds is people who are just getting started. They don't know where to start, how to get that first client. So starting with you, Cal, like going back 5 years ago, how was it that you got that very first client?
I got 2 clients at roughly the same time, and one was a previous employer. So I would actually encourage anyone to try to see if your old employers need your services, because they are willing to pay for them at one time, and they may be willing to pay for them even if in a diminished capacity in the future. So I would definitely reach out to your previous network and see what you can get through that. And the other way was actually just someone found me through SEO. Like I had done some SEO to show my product, what it can do. I don't know exactly what keyword he found me with, but he found me on LinkedIn, messaged me there, and just said like, hey, you seem like a guy who would be able to help us with this project that we have going on. Could you change your product to suit our use case? And that was how it got rolling.
Your old company being your first client, this is something I've heard multiple
That was
people.
my second client, actually.
Oh, that
The
was your
first one
second client.
was the other one, but they were roughly the same time,
Around the
and they
same
were
time.
completely unrelated to each other.
And so SQL Pipe, was the goal to use it as a lead magnet, or was the idea to like sell that as a service?
I kind of went into it with a totally open mind. I
Okay.
never had a solid business plan. In fact, my mom and my dad were terrified. They're like, "You're going to make this piece of software for free and give it away, and that's going to pay the bills. How exactly?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I'm going to do." And I just did it, and it worked out. So I would say what you really need to do is focus on people's problems, and the money will find you. I would
Okay,
say
that's cool.
truly the hard part is finding problems that people are willing to solve that someone else hasn't already solved and isn't dominating the marketing for. So obviously, moving data around, there's a ton of products out there that will solve that problem. But can you find a specific niche that isn't completely saturated with existing marketing? Because not only do people need a problem that they're willing to pay for, they also have to be able to find you. And that was when those things came together. That's when I started getting my first freelancing clients. I'm not sure that it was the fastest or easiest way for it to happen. In fact, it seems like Agostino, we had a little bit of a chat before the podcast. He got his first client much faster than I did. So I'm not sure it was the easiest way to do it, but it has given me this really strong niche where I just have customers keep coming back to me because, I have this inbuilt advantage that I have a piece of software. I'm not just giving you my time, I'm giving you a piece of software.
Okay, that's interesting. So build a piece of software, basically you're putting out for free, and then that is the way you people sign up for it, they use it, and then reach out to them about your services.
Exactly.
Agostino, are you back? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear perfectly. Sorry,
Okay.
it was a mini Wi-Fi outage. So yeah, I should be
Perfect
back
timing.
now.
So how about this? Do a quick intro, what services you provide, how long you've been doing it, and then jump into how you got that very first client when you went out on your own.
So I have a machine learning and data science background. I used to work in fintechs and also at Shopify, which was very broad, a very broad role. Back in the days, I had a business role, so I'm a self-taught machine learning engineer and data scientist, which is why I'm always very close to the business as well, which I really enjoy as of today, which is also why my freelance services right now are very much focused on building products, which is something I personally really like, and I think is kind of a nice intersection for companies as well to not only provide code and a machine learning model or an LLM application or whatever, but also think about how could this be used as a product internally or externally. That's basically what I do. That's what I enjoy doing, and I've been doing it for a bit more than 6 months now, which went pretty quickly. And how did I get my first client? So my very first client, I got it through my network. So I think in 2023, I started posting on LinkedIn a little bit. I had a break from LinkedIn, then I picked it up again, etc., etc. And that's how I met an AI agency called Sugar. Great agency. And back then they were called differently. They asked me to do a webinar or a Q&A, which I did for free. So we were not even back then, I was still working at Shopify and we were not even thinking about any freelance gigs, but we were already building kind of a relationship. And then when the time came that I started freelancing, I reached out, asked them, hey, is there anything you need help with, etc. And it turned out to be that they needed help with the project and the client, which is why I think for me, how I got my very first client was basically through some work that I did before that was for free as well, which I gave before I asked for something, and then the time was right.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't know this story. So you basically did this free thing for this AI consultancy, and then you had that relationship. And then when the time came, you basically reached out and said, hey, do you need any machine learning engineers to help you with your client engagements?
Yeah, exactly. So I was quite terrified to do freelancing because I'm not the best acquisition or sales guy, right? So what I did was I reached out to everyone I worked with, not everyone, but people I enjoyed working with, and told everyone that I'm freelancing now and if they need anyone. And I don't know to how many people I reached out, but Sugar, this agency, they were one of them, and they actually said, yeah, we're looking for someone. Quite in parallel, I also got a job through a freelancing network, like a invite-only network. That was basically just the same. I asked a guy who I used to work with, who invited me to the network, and then through that I got the second job in parallel. But yeah, in general, it was just telling everyone that I'm freelancing so that they think about me when they hear something.
Okay, so the core kind of acquisition strategy, or just the strategy to find work, is okay, let me reach out to everyone who it seems relevant to in my network, let them know I'm freelancing, and then through that you just naturally found these opportunities. And I feel like this reaching out or having relationships with people with established agencies is a really underrated approach, because for everyone who's done this, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this, it's hard to do both, wear both caps, your sales cap and then your engineer cat. And to do both
Too bad.
simultaneously, yeah, and to do both simultaneously is a real challenge. So anytime if you can like partner up with someone, or you can like reach out to an agency who's already got a proven acquisition funnel, and then you just do your services, that'll kind of make your life much easier. So let's go to you, Sarap. You're still working full time, which is like especially interesting because I feel like most people are in this camp where they haven't made the leap yet, but they want to explore different options when it comes to entrepreneurship. So how is it that you got your first client?
I also have to agree with what's been said already. So throughout your network, that's like the main thing. But back then, I was so terrified because I looked into my network and there was no one. Like it was like my mom or my cousin. And I was like, who am I going to reach out for? Right. But then when you sit down and you think more, you realize like, okay, I have friends who most of my like bubble is in tech anyway. So I have friends in like big companies that are working for tech companies. So I started literally, I wrote like an Excel table of every friend that I have, everybody related that I met in my life, including my previous employers as well. So I reached out to my previous CTO. I was like, hey, by the way, I started also doing freelancing services. I do machine learning, model development, or also like data science, or if you want also IT security or anything with deployments, are you interested? And he said, yes. I was like, yeah, I'm very interested. We need people right now. Can you start? And then I was like, yeah, let's go, let's start. And then we started talking about like money, and then it didn't work out. He was like, I'm sorry, this is too expensive. And I was like, oh no. And then he was already like, the sales was gone. And that was like my first sales moment where I was like, no, I messed it up. I should have like maybe asked for a little bit less or whatever. But then I didn't stop, of course. I started reaching out to people also within my network, just basically notifying people that I'm doing this job. And funny enough, my first client came through my ex-colleague who just left the company I'm working with right now. And I thought he's going to find me maybe a freelance opportunity in this new company, but it wasn't that. He was also freelancing under the hood without like me knowing. And he found his clients through Medium, funny enough, writing articles. He's also like a very good guy on Medium. And he's like, oh, by the way, my client right now needs somebody with exactly your skill set. I know that you started freelancing. Would you be interested? Can I connect you guys? And I was like, oh my God, like, yes, thank you, please. Which was also the easiest sale ever, because when you get referrals from like a friend or something, the person is already half sold, especially if that person has done a good job, because like the referral also plays that role. I didn't even have to sell myself. It was already kind of like a sold thing. So we started the agreement. It went for like 3 months, built the infrastructure for them for like their AI startup, and they were happy, and maybe they will kind of come back in the future. I don't know. I know that most of your recurring clients come from your previous clients. So that was the thing that happened. So you never know where the opportunity is going to come from. It's just such a weird word. I would never have thought my ex-colleague is going to get me the next job. It was the most unexpected thing.
I feel like two like patterns kind of came out through all your experiences that you guys are talking about. Like the first one is like you got to put yourself out there, whether that's reaching out to people or just putting something out into the open source community like what you did, Cal. And then the second thing was this idea of giving. So Cal, you kind of gave away the software. Agostino, you gave away your time to lead that workshop. So I feel like these two things put together, like, you know, try to give wherever you can, and then also put yourself out there and just let people know that you're doing these freelance services.
I think a really difficult thing is knowing where to give, because you only have so much time. And especially if you're working a full-time job or something, we were talking a little bit before the show that the hardest thing is always product market fit. Or in this case, we're not a product, but like, what is the labor that the market really needs at this point? So just figuring out what is the thing that people are actually willing to pay money for is still the hardest part. Figure out what people want and give some of that away for free. Then you're in a really strong value proposition. But if you're giving away something that no one wants, then, you know, that's great, but it doesn't really help you that much.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Like, give something away, and if no one really takes it or cares, or like, that's probably a good signal that if no one's willing to take it for free, they're probably not going to pay for it. So that's going to be like a good signal to help you refine that. So we talked about how this all started for everyone. I'm curious about how you guys are getting clients now. So kind of starting with you, Agostino. I know you're only like 6 months into the journey, but like, how are you getting clients now? Is it still just like reaching out to people in your network, or are you starting to explore other acquisition strategies?
I still focus on my network because I tried various channels, right? So I tried public freelancing platforms, didn't work for me. I tried LinkedIn jobs, didn't work for me. I tried cold outreach, didn't work for me, but I think because I haven't found my right offer. So I think that's on me. I think that's still something I could explore more. I'm a bit too comfortable to do, like a bit too lazy is the wrong word, but there's no need for me to spend time on that. So it's right now through my network. Like when I see cool companies, I reach out. When I proactively, even if they don't have any opening yet, but I'll start building the relationship just because I could see an opportunity in the future. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. So it's right now mostly my LinkedIn network.
Interesting. So these are people you're like first connected with on LinkedIn, or do you like reach out to other people as well?
Also second degree connection. So when I see that I don't know, someone I'm connected with is commenting on something or talking about something, then I'll explore that. Yesterday, for example, I reached out to a company that I just saw because someone in my network commented on it. They were looking for a prompt engineer, which was not an ideal fit for what I want to do. But I think the company is quite cool and very interesting. So I reached out to the CEO because it's a small company, and we just had a chat. Or like we were planning to have one.
Okay, and then I guess to kind of go a little bit deeper into your like funnel, like what does that your sales pipeline look like? You reach out, and then what's the goal, to get them on a free call, or like what's that next step that you're trying to get them to?
Yeah, usually a free call. I think I'm a way better talker than I'm a writer. So I think showing a few prototypes, talking about things I've done in the past, or also just like having a good personal connection, I think that's super valuable. So I usually try to get them on a 15 to 30-minute call, depends on how busy the other person is. 50 minutes is not ideal, but better than nothing. That's the end goal. And if there's an opportunity, great. If not, I try to follow up every 2-3 months. I set reminders, everything, because even if I give something away for free or I had a chat, I think the important stuff is to not get forgotten. So I'm quite strict on following up with people.
Okay, that's super interesting. So I'll call out real quick that we will do Q&A at the end, because I feel like there's a whole rabbit hole I could dive down into here. But if you guys have like specific things you're curious about, drop them in the comments and we'll get to them at the end. Moving over to you, Saurabh, how is it that you get clients now? Is it still similar to how you got your first client?
It's a very interesting basically move from what I tried. I can really relate to you, Agostino, because I've tried everything in the book. If you try to do this as an experiment, then you're not very discouraged to fail. I tried content. I'm also like a host of a podcast called Data Tales. I tried to create a podcast, write content on LinkedIn, write case studies and post about them also on LinkedIn. For me, for example, the LinkedIn content didn't work at all. Like I didn't generate any leads. What it did generate is like I got a little bit more followers. So if you're doing it for that kind of validation, then maybe yes, do it. But my goal was strictly just getting leads for my services. So that didn't work. I actually was approached by a marketing agency to do like a cold outreach, where right now they do it like on LinkedIn. They can find the leads for you and send in automated messages with follow-up. So similar to what kind of you're doing, Agostino. And I said yes. I was like, yeah, let's do it, because I don't want to do this by myself. If you have some intelligence that you can do it for me, let's do this. Also didn't work. And I think the main thing was I also didn't know exactly what to offer, although some platforms enable you to do A/B testing. So I had basically two services, like in Gen AI MVP development that I was trying to push, and the more like infrastructure, IT, basically deployment, DevOps kind of role, like ML Ops kind of role. So I was trying to experiment with these two kind of services. It didn't work so well for me. I have to maybe go through the messages, understand what went through. But by talking to other founders, what I realized, everybody's getting bombarded by services on LinkedIn. And if somebody doesn't need it, probably people are not going to buy, regardless how good you are. So the process was, how can I find more people that really need my services, and then I can focus on maybe my sales approach. What has actually been working so well for me now, which is surprising, is communities. People really undermine these kind of stuff. Like the same content, if you post it in a community, for example, there's this community called AI Automation Agency community. It has like 40K. It's like also like another famous guy on YouTube, Liam something, Otley or something. And he made a school community where people just go there, post some stuff, and it's filled with business people, like people
Is that
who
a Discord or a website? What is it?
It's School, if you SKOL, and you can just join this. And it's mainly focused on these low-code, no-code tools for building AI automations. But because of that, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of like beginners who never really touched code in real life. So if you stand out as an expert who's actually dealt with the horrors of data science in enterprise and stuff, then you really stand out. And over there, I've been getting a lot of business partners to chat, to build stuff for them, and maybe also go like 50-50. So more like a business opportunity rather than just freelancing. And the other thing that also got me clients is running clubs. I know it's not the most
Yeah, I
common
love
thing.
run clubs.
Yeah, running clubs has
Shout out
been
London
very.
City Runners.
If you want, we have like a very good running club called Founders Running Club. It's a new initiative since last year that's spread fire all over so many different cities now. And over there, they're like basically my target audience, CTOs, CEOs. So we'll be chatting about, I never like do any salesy. We'll be just talking about AI, maybe helping them with their problems. And then what happens is like they message me. It's like, oh, by the way, remember when we talked about this? I need help with that. Are you available for some consultation, or can you build this for me and stuff like that? And over these two channels has been the most rewarding. But it only came after experimenting with so many different options and failing and just not giving up. But I'm just still waiting for something that is just more consistent, or maybe different type of projects that are a little bit longer, so I don't have to keep jumping from one client to another. But we can talk about this also.
Yeah, that's super insightful. So like two things stood out when you were talking about posting that school community. It reminded me of kind of how Agostino got his first client, where he basically partnered with another agency who already had an acquisition funnel. Basically, they handled the sales and Agostino handled the implementation. And it sounds like that's kind of what you were also finding on that school
Exactly.
community.
Yeah.
And then this like in-person networking, I feel like is probably the most underweighted these days because everything is so online. But nothing beats in-person interaction. And then if you're in that right room, you're part of that right community, it could be like a really productive sales channel. So it seems like it's working for you. Let's jump to Cal. So SQL Pipe is how it all started. Is that still the main way that you're getting clients? Like, what does your acquisition look like today?
Well, I'm actually not really even trying to get clients anymore. I've had several clients for years, and you only have so much bandwidth as one person, right? I have one person kind of working for me part-time to help out with some front-end stuff, but I'm really just not even looking for new freelancing clients. And that's kind of reflected in how much I neglect my social media and whatnot. Really, what I'm looking to do now is make the jump from freelancer to product company. And that's always been my goal, is to have a startup with a product. And, eventually I'd like to, sell the company or something. Freelancing was never the end goal for me. It was just kind of a way to say, okay, I want to be in business for myself. And this is a way to find the problems that people are willing to pay for, which I'll keep talking about it because it is the most important thing and it's also the hardest thing. Agostino was saying earlier before the call, a lot of the times you'll see someone write like a few sentences about, well, you need to find product market fit. And then they'll write a whole rest of the blog post about something else. And it's like, no. That's actually the important thing. And writing the code is almost superfluous after you find product market fit. And like we say product market fit, like it's just something that you find by like, Googling how to find product market fit. But in reality, it's like you have to go through the fire to have that feel for what are the problems that people are feeling that they'll actually take out their checkbook and write, a check for thousands of dollars. Because unless you want to be a B2C company, which I would say freelancing doesn't prepare you particularly well for B2C. It's more of preparing you for B2B because you're talking to businesses who have problems they want to solve and you're writing code for them. So yeah, I recently got a verbal agreement to purchase some software for the first time just a few days ago. So I'm hoping, my advice here will be like, hey, here's how I got into freelancing. And then here's how I eventually got out of it, because I think a lot of people who get into freelancing kind of have that same ambition of, I want to work for myself. I want to have my own company. Freelancing feels like a good way to dip my toes in the water to be like, hey, do I have what it takes to be on my own?
No, I feel like that's super insightful because that was my experience. And a lot of people that I talk to, freelancing is kind of like a stepping stone. It's the most similar thing you can do to a full-time job that's working for yourself at the same time. So it's kind of like a nice way to kind of ease into entrepreneurship, learn the concepts, learn how to sell, learn how to find customers, learn how to define your services and things like that. So yeah, it's cool to see that you're kind of making that transition right now, because I feel like
I can
a lot
tell
of
you what I
people,
would do if I was trying to get more clients. I would say the most asymmetric thing that I've seen is communities, like Sarap was saying. I haven't had luck in particular with like Discord. I've gotten a lot of engagement on places like Discord communities, but I've actually found that honestly, going on Reddit and answering questions that people have, you never know who's behind that username. So I've gotten contracts from just answering questions on Reddit with my SQL Pipe branded username. And they go and they're like, who's this guy who seems to know a ton about databases? They go to SQLpipe.com and they're like, oh, he's got a thing. So it all kind of depends on, you need a good web presence behind that social media post. So that's important too. But once that's set up, you can just kind of leave it with maybe a blog post every once in a while. Maybe not. You don't really even need to. And then if you directly engage with people, you're just kind of rolling the dice on who's behind this question. And a lot of the time, it's someone who's really smart, who has a problem, who is like, this problem is so important to me. I'm going to go on Reddit and I'm going to type it out and I'm going to take all the hate from all the haters that are going to be like, this is a stupid question, just in the hope that they can solve that. I would say ChatGPT is making that a little bit harder because we all have a giant machine in the sky that we can ask questions now. But Reddit is still really popular. Yeah, that's the best community that I've found. Like asymmetric input to output. How am I going to get the most views on my written material?
Yeah, I love that because, I post a lot of content and like it'll get a lot of reach, but I feel like Reddit, it's like you're posting content, but it's very targeted. So it's like,
Yeah.
instead of like doing a fire hose and like reaching thousands of people, you reach like dozens of people, but you're
No, you
reaching
reach
the right
thousands.
people. Oh yeah, well, you reach thousands as
You
opposed to like
reach
tens of
many
thousands.
thousands of people with even a reasonably popular Reddit post.
Yeah, so like you reach thousands versus like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but you're reaching the right people because they've taken the time to go on Reddit, go onto this forum, like they clicked on this post for a reason. And I actually feel like ChatGPT might make this even better because it's like this idea of, at this point, like who's going to be posting on Reddit? Like the people who tried ChatGPT and it wasn't helpful. So now they need a human to respond. So that's even like more perfect for freelancing services.
Yeah, and just to further your answer that ChatGPT doesn't really affect it that much, the one contract that I'm thinking of as I'm telling the story, I know for a fact that the guy who posted that question, he uses ChatGPT all the time because we had a working relationship. So people are still going to Reddit for real human feedback.
Like we're only through 2 questions and we're already 30 minutes in. So let's do one more question and then we'll transition to Q&A. So Cal, you brought up like doing the services and things like that. But I feel like outside of getting your first client, I think the next biggest problem that people have is, what do I sell? Like what services do I provide? So I kind of want to get insight into everyone's process for figuring that out, whether you're still trying to figure that out. So let's start with you, Saurabh. How was that process for you? Or if that's an ongoing process, like what does that look like?
It's a very good question because when I started, I had no idea. I didn't have an idea that I had to have a package to sell. I thought like, oh, I'm a data science expert. People just going to pay me money. I just need to define my hourly rate, right? And then
I think we all kind of start like that. We're just like, I want to be in business for myself. 100%. I don't really care. I'm just going to start doing it. 100%. It's totally fine to be that way.
Exactly. And only when I started doing outreach that I realized I don't have anything to offer. Like people don't know what I'm offering. How can I package it in a nice way to make it like a comparison? It's like, oh, you have the premium or you have the basic. And actually looking at Upwork is where I started to get my first inspiration. I started to seeing what problems are people posting because Upwork is the base, like the best pain points allocator in the world. You can see people actually, this is my problem. This is how much I'm willing to pay for. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of like price competition. So it's really tough to stand out there. But as an inspiration, this is what I looked at. And my basic mental thought was, am I able to 100% be sure to deliver what these guys are asking for or not? And I started moving from one project to another. And lately I realized, not lately, but like after going through many posts, I realized like, okay, what I feel confident of delivering is actually building infrastructure for a data science solution. Because there's not much uncertainty around it. But if you're maybe building a data science solution or like computer vision or stuff that has a lot of like parameters, or the data might not be good, I was very nervous that I'm not going to be comfortable to deliver properly. So that's why I initially started as an expert for building infrastructure, ML ops, anything related to CI/CD. So like I know I can do this, like I've built it so many times that I'm very confident I can deliver. And that's why I got my first client doing exactly the same thing. And I feel like after you successfully deliver a project, your also self-confidence start to increase. And I was like, actually, let me look back at those data science projects. Like, why do I think I'm not gonna deliver? And even if not, why do I feel like I'm not be able to transparently showcase why I cannot deliver this and it's out of my hand? And then I started also applying for these kind of jobs and realized like, okay, I can also work with whatever I need. I just need to be very transparent with the communication. I need to be able to just keep the customer in the loop with what's going on. Don't disappear for a month and then come back and say, sorry, I couldn't build this. Like just say your process, maybe a weekly update or something like this. My process started to evolve a little bit. Also getting into Gen AI solutions, SaaS products. Basically, I'm building my services based on the requests that I'm receiving and the feedback I'm getting from the market. I'm not so tightened into like, oh, I'm only going to offer this and then I'm only going to reach out to the people who need this. I was more like, again, as an experiment, seeing which areas actually providing more value and which areas I can charge more. Because I noticed, for example, building MVPs or POCs, there's only a limit to how much you can charge for a POC. But if you, as we discussed earlier, like if you target maybe mid-sized companies, they have bigger scale problems that you can also be specialized in that.
Target
So
big companies. Big companies are the best.
Big companies
Big
are the best.
companies
I agree.
are the best, but it's also nice to build an MVP and then ideally a successful MVP to continue that relationship. I think that's also an interesting approach.
I totally agree with this. I feel like the entry to these big players is a little bit harder. I think it's easier to, especially if you're starting, to start with startups, start with maybe people bootstrapping or whatever, and then it's easier to jump to these bigger guys when you have like a lot of case studies that you can showcase and referrals and testimonials.
I would just
could
like
be
to
totally
comment
wrong.
that my first customer was Fortune 500. I think a lot of it is just having the confidence and frankly the arrogance to play with the big dogs. I would encourage you to say, you know what, I am good enough to do work for these giant companies. They have more problems than anyone and more money than anyone.
That's
Right,
true.
it's interesting. Well, kind of like reflecting on what you were saying about your approach, Saurabh, like, okay, it started by going on Upwork, not to get jobs, but to find pain points. And
Mhm.
then you started with, okay, what do I feel comfortable with delivering? So it was kind of like this mix of what are the pain points, but also like, what do I feel like I can provide? But now that's kind of evolved into expanding out those services based on the types of requests that you're getting. And then maybe you're
Mhm.
going to start distilling those down in the future, or maybe you're not going to distill them down in the future. So curious to see how that goes.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect summary.
So Cal, I'm curious about your process. Like, how was it that you figured out, like with that Fortune 500 company, like how did you figure out what services that you wanted to provide? Or was it that they said, oh, we want this, and you're like, okay, I can do that? And then how did that evolve?
It was that second thing where they had found me, I believe, through SEO, and they had this specific problem. And they said, hey, it looks like your tool could do this thing for us and save a bunch of money. And that was true. And so they brought me on to help them with that project. And the best thing about these big companies, like I said, is they just have so many problems and so much to solve. And they move so slowly that if you can come in and deliver something for them quickly, they're just going to keep giving you problems because you're never going to run out of problems to solve for a large company. I'm sure you guys have heard of Mr. Beast, the YouTuber. He has this line where he says it's a lot easier to make a YouTube video that gets 50 million views than to make 50 videos that make 1 million views. And I kind of have that same mentality for a customer where, like, if you get one fantastic customer who just has so many problems, that is what you really want. Whereas I actually think Saurabh's idea of looking at Upwork to see like what are people paying for right now, it's a fantastic idea to find people who are searching for solutions on Upwork, which is usually people with a relatively limited budget, and then you kind of like solve their problem, and that's kind of the last you hear of them. That's a really smart way to get a gauge of that market. The problem is these big companies, they don't really go around just posting publicly, hey, here are our problems, unless maybe you want to look into like job postings or something like that, which is actually a really interesting way to get insight into, hey, what is this company's problems in particular? Like, I used to be an infrastructure engineer, so let me just look at this giant company's infrastructure engineers postings to see what they're hiring for, because they'll tell you in very vague, veiled language what they're trying to do. And maybe you could somehow track down that hiring manager and be like, hey, I know you have this problem. I can help you solve that. That could be a way to do it, to get in at these big companies. But honestly, there is no secret. I got lucky that they reached out to me.
I like that nuanced perspective of like finding the roles on Upwork. And then basically the way to scale that up to bigger companies is to look at job posts and try to read the tea leaves. Like, of course, it's going to require a bit more context. Like, you need to understand the industry so you can kind of read between the lines and kind of understand the broader context of what they mean by, oh, we need someone that is experienced in like AWS SageMaker and knows how to transition from like, closed source code to like open source code. Like, so you can kind of see like, oh, maybe they're making this transition to AWS and now they need help with kind of like refactoring code bases or something like that.
Totally. And really what you're looking for is signals that people have problems they're willing to pay money to solve. And a big company's signal is job postings.
Let's go to you, Augustino. Like, what was your process for figuring out those services in the early days?
I basically just took what I did at Shopify and tried to sell it. So at Shopify, I worked for the sales team. We tried to make the sales process more efficient, which is basically more sales with the same amount of people. So I had a little bit of experience, which was mixed, like data engineering, Gen AI, traditional ML. So I tried to sell that because I thought, okay, if I can make people more money through sales, they will pay me for sure. Turns out 2024 felt like the year where all the companies created some kind of sales tool, AI, SDRs or whatever. So I suddenly had competition that I was not expecting. And in the end, like the companies I reached out to, the agency I talked about earlier, for example, they had their clients with their problems already. So I just wanted to survive and make money, which is why I then dropped the idea of sales and focused more on how do I get money and how do I get my first clients. Whereas now I'm slowly transitioning into building AI products. So I think I would go more towards the proof of concept and MVP area, maybe for bigger companies, maybe for smaller companies, but like with a strong focus on product management.
Since you had that relationship with the agency, it wasn't such a focus of yours to figure out, okay, what services and offers can I make to clients, because you basically had this relationship with this agency and they told you, hey, we have this client with this problem. Can you help us? Was that kind of the story?
Exactly. That's how it was.
Okay.
It's also like luckily it was a very interesting project as well. So it was
Nice.
super interesting. I was confident that I can solve it. So that's why it worked out pretty well.
Well, let's transition to Q&A. So if you guys got questions, drop it in the comment section on YouTube or on LinkedIn. But we've already got some coming in. So let's see. We got one from Yusuf. I'm still upgrading my skills in data science, AI development, but I don't know how to research potential clients. So I guess you guys have any advice for Yusuf? He's still at the beginning of his journey, still trying to like upskill, and he's trying to see what kind of clients he can service.
Yeah, I really liked Sarup's idea of looking at Upwork. I think that is fantastic idea, Sarup, and also looking at job postings. That's kind of like the bottom and the top of the market. Sorry, go ahead, Augustino.
Oh, good. I just want to say I would also focus on things I can do really well right now. So when I think back of my time when I started with data science, data analytics and dashboarding was something I was really good at. So I would focus on my strengths as well and see, hey, where can I provide this service? Because then I can approach these companies with confidence instead of saying I can build an LLM application with very little experience.
Sarup, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Same as what's already been said. I would have also done like the Upwork just to get a feeling what I could deliver, what kind of stuff are being asked. I wouldn't stick to it, as Cal mentioned, like was a really good feedback. You're competing literally with the entire world. Not only that drives the price down, but as Cal said, people who are working on high level, they don't post on Upwork. They will probably reach out to other agencies, or that's why also as mentioned already, partnering up with some agencies is also a good strategy, because sometimes they subcontract some stuff for you, which also happened maybe last month. Throughout this running club, I met like an agency owner who has like, it's a software development agency owner, traditional software, but they don't have the AI skills, and they wanted to expand their services because right now everybody is expanding to the AI to serve this niche. They reached out to me just so I can build this for their client, and it's literally subcontracting work. It costs you nothing, so it was really, really a good way also.
Yeah, that's awesome. We got another one from Ben. Do you all tend to charge an hourly rate, a project rate, or something else? How did you determine how much to charge? This is a really good question. Anyone can just feel free to jump in.
I charge an hourly rate, and I charge the same thing across all of my clients.
How much do you charge?
That's for me to know.
Okay, depends on the client and the problem.
I do daily rates, which depend a little bit on the client. So if I have a very exciting project with a very underfunded company, for example, then I would charge a little less.
For me, I'm still exploring with both. I'm still at the exploration phase, I think. I did both actually, and I have to say, doing a fixed pricing is very, it puts a lot of strain on you, especially if you're starting. So if you're very
unless you know
confident,
exactly what you have to deliver and exactly how you're going to do it, fixed prices are really hard.
Yeah, I think this is something you can leverage with time after you have a very good system to build things. So you can charge really high amounts because you can build it so much quicker. But I would recommend charging something average that where you live that you're happy with. You need to charge, like that's also something for me. I'm charging way more than my rate at my normal job, but you need to also make sure if you want to do this full time, you need to charge at least maybe 10-20% more just to come up at the same net result, because you pay way more taxes, you have way more stuff, at least in Germany, that you need to account for. So to come up at the same result as a normal employee, you have to earn way more. So you need to factor that in and factor the risk and all this kind of stuff. Don't feel discouraged to charge like, I don't know, $100 an hour or more or whatever or less. Just see, as again, depending on the client, see what the client react, and just explore different pricing strategies that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable when you ask for it, because people can see this. It's like, oh, I want 500 an hour, and then you cringe, and then nobody's gonna say yes. You know, like you need to be really confident that this is good, and every once in a while increase it a little bit so it's not outside of your reach.
The pattern I'm hearing is starting with an hourly rate is good because you're still trying to figure everything out. You're still trying to figure out how to be a freelancer, what clients to go after, what services to provide. But maybe down the line, once you lock something in, maybe really like carve out a niche and a specific customer avatar, you can start doing project-based pricing once that becomes like really predictable for you. So this one's actually from our Discord. What social media platforms, if any, have you found most valuable in finding new clients? What would you recommend these platforms to new freelancers?
I have two in mind specifically. Go ahead, Agostino.
For me, it's LinkedIn. It's also just a short answer. For me, it's like I grew my LinkedIn network, and that's it. And that works really well. Would recommend it. But it's work, right? Like it's not easy. So it's a bit of work.
I think LinkedIn is just like a prerequisite. Like you can't get away from having a decent LinkedIn profile. It doesn't do that much for you in terms of generating inbound leads, though. I do think Reddit is my favorite for that. I'm not really sure how much I like Twitter or X. It seems like that's more for arguments than for actually giving value to the world.
I find X is good if you're trying to go after startups and founders and maybe VCs and like that crowd. LinkedIn's really good for like basically any industry, company of any size, they're probably on LinkedIn. But I feel like if you're trying to niche down into like entrepreneurs and startups and people in that space, I think X could make sense as well.
From my experience, LinkedIn, for example, didn't work out so well for me, although like I was really pushing content that I thought it was valuable towards my target audience. What ended up happening in LinkedIn is I was just spamming my connection with, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And a lot of people got like annoyed, and I can sense this, you know. But what I heard it works really well, that is surprising, is YouTube, which I didn't actually suggest or think that YouTube is going to work as well as it is. But I hear this from most of the people I interact with, is like they got a lot of good leads through YouTube and Medium by writing articles. So I would say before maybe start writing random content and throwing it out there, just know exactly what you want to focus on, what is the niche, and maybe explore YouTube. If you don't like your face being on camera, that's absolutely fine. Like I'm also uncomfortable, or was uncomfortable. Now I have a podcast, which was coincidence. But I would say maybe Medium, because I heard really good things coming from Medium. And some publications, they do the SEO so people can find your posts through that. But again, it's pure luck. Is like a spider web, and then if the lead hits it, then it works. I would still suggest go there and call people, and not on the phone, but like send messages or whatever. Just be more active in that area.
Yeah.
I think you're the most active out of all of us on social media. What's
Yes.
your answer?
Yeah, YouTube, like 80% of my leads when I was freelancing came from there. And even now, like a good chunk of my students for my AI bootcamp come from YouTube and Medium. So the one thing that I regret in retrospect is because I was basically just, and still am, making content on things that I'm curious about and learning in the space. So like you guys, Cal and Saurabh, you guys found me through fine tuning content. But the thing is, like, that's a pretty broad net. You know, if you're trying to like provide services, like what I was getting like 2 discovery calls a week when I was doing freelance services, which I thought was pretty good for me. But the thing was, like, no 2 customers had the same industry. Like, people were coming from all over the place, which kind of made it difficult for me to rapidly learn this and like new industry and to kind of craft a good offer for that specific customer, but then also like do sales and then also like do content creation. So it kind of just got like overwhelming for me, and I wasn't able to keep up with it, which is why I pivoted to just doing education, which is less of a leap from making educational content on YouTube to like having the paid thing. Okay, so we got 2 more questions, I think. So Puran asked, as I am new in this field, how could I be confident or validate the results on the work to get satisfaction of my clients? So it sounds like someone that's also new to the field, but they're trying to figure out, you know, how to figure out what services to provide and be confident in that. I don't know, you guys have any thoughts or advice?
Maybe I can say something, because I was literally in the same shoes where every time I got an inquiry, I really got like a tiny panic attack. I was like, oh my God, why are you reaching out? Like, I want this, but I still don't want to, because there's a pressure to deliver. At some point, you just have to get it over with. You just have to, as I said, like once you start delivering successful projects, you build up the confidence. But especially at that time, that's why it's really important. As I think Agostino, you mentioned this, focus on what you've built before or what you can build right now. Don't think it's like, oh, LLM is the new thing, I need to learn it and offer services there. Then you're gonna feel very insecure. But if you, I don't know, build computer vision solutions or something multiple times, even if you've done it yourself or like a personal project or whatever, you know how to do this. This builds up a little bit more confidence that, okay, I can get this done. And if you can't, it's also okay, because you just need to enter this conversation very transparently with your client.
Yeah,
and
I completely agree with Sarah.
You go first, Cal.
I just wanted to say I agree.
Yeah, me too. And I think what helps a lot is also clarifying requirements, understanding what does the client need, what do they expect, and can I deliver it or can I not? I think making that pretty clear from the very beginning helps.
Actually, maybe I also have maybe a small trick that I do for free, which also improves the relationship with the client. Sometimes I offer a free feasibility test. That 1-day feasibility test, give me all your requirements. I will see if I can do it or not, absolutely for free. And if I know that I can't, then I say, I'm sorry, find someone else. Your data is not ready or something is not correct. Because I get a lot of requests, oh, you need to query this API. And then I look into it, and the LinkedIn API, you cannot query unless you become a partner, or you need to connect with this and link with that. I think that's a great way to improve your confidence and give them something like for free that they would definitely go with you.
Yeah, and I like that. And because if it's not something you can make significant progress on in 1 day, it just may not be a feasible thing to do a larger engagement on. And it reminds me of an approach I heard from Santiago. I think his last name is Valderrama. He is a big following on X and LinkedIn. He wouldn't even like get the engagement. He would like basically find leads on Upwork, just go as far as he can in 1 day, like try to solve the problem in 1 day, and then apply to the job with his results of that first day of work. And that, I think he had like a 40% close rate or something like that for every job that he applied to. So it wasn't even like the people he talked to, it was the ones he applied to. So he had a really high close rate.
Or you ask.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this like theme of like giving is very powerful. Okay, so we got time for one last question. This also came from the Discord. I heard networking is the easiest way to find leads, but what if I don't know anyone in my immediate network that needs my skills? Does it mean I have to do cold calling? Saurabh, you started
I feel really
laughing.
strongly about this one.
Okay.
No one wants you to cold call them. You need to
Yes.
expand your network if no one is in your network who needs your skills. And what does expanding your network look like? It looks like going to meetups, being a friendly face. Hopefully you live in a large city with a good variety of tech meetups. If you don't, there are lots of communities. So Discord communities are great, Slacks are great. There is going to be a lot of noise in them, but you will find genuine people who are looking to talk about their problems there. And if you just talk about their problem and don't try to sell them anything, they are now in your network. And in the future, you can reach out to them and say, hey, are you still working on this? Do you have any new challenges? If you ask people to tell you their problems, they're going to tell you their problems. Maybe you'll be able to solve them. Maybe you won't. But yeah, expand the network. And that doesn't mean cold calling. That means making actual connections with people and talking to them about what they're doing.
I love that. Super insightful. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can totally agree. Yeah, totally agree with Cal. I would say still, I laughed because when I read this, these thoughts, like I had the same thoughts about 8 months ago, where like I literally know nobody. But then when you think more into your connections, then some name's gonna pop up. It doesn't have to be, oh, I know a CTO. Like, don't focus on this. Just say, who do I know that has the slightest resemblance of me getting a new client? And that was my ex-colleague, and that was my friend, and that was my cousin. For example, now I'm building chatbots for dentists, for example. And then I reached out to my dentist who made me braces about 8 years ago. And he was so excited to help me find pain points into what dentists actually look for in chatbots. These are the people who we say, yes, reach out to. It's not a cold call because these people know you, like your dentist, your cousin, your uncle. So start with these. Once you run out of all these people, and at the same time as Cal, join meetups, running groups, whatever you can, anything that is related to what you want to do. You're going to feel in the beginning very overwhelmed because you feel all this effort is going nowhere. And this is what I felt maybe 4 months in. I was in every meetup possible, talking to everybody. Everything seems so exciting and new. And then you realize 4 months later, like nothing's going anywhere. But if you stay in, then you start. For example, my first client that came out of a community was 6 months later that he said something. So it's a long game. These networking and connections is such a long game. You don't see the results immediately, but you just need to stay consistent.
Absolutely. Maybe you talk to a YouTuber and a year later he invites you on his podcast.
Exactly. That's like a perfect example.
Maybe. Yeah, I hear that happens a lot actually. So it's really interesting about what you said, Sarab. The point isn't that people in your network need your services, but maybe they know someone who needs your services.
Exactly.
And it's much easier to have that conversation. I think that's all the time we have. We went a little bit over, but I think it was a super insightful conversation. Well, thank you guys, Cal, Sarab, Agostino. Thanks for joining me. Thank you everyone who joined live and for all the great questions. Next week, we have another event where Jeremy is going to be walking through a real world LLM case study that he built for one of his clients. So here we talked a lot about like freelancing acquisition strategies. That is going to be more technically focused. So if you're curious about how that looks, you can register for that on our events calendar, which you'll get a link to if you registered for this event. So once again, thanks guys for joining me, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Thanks everyone.
Pleasure.